Good morning. Yesterday we were notified by the state attorney's office that the grand jury had handed down a first-degree murder indictments for the following two homicide cases that occurred in 2013. The first homicide occurred on March the 25th, 2013. The victim was a Mrs. Carmen Riley, 45 years of age. She resided at 702 West 14th Street. A firearm was used in the commission of that crime. The second homicide victim occurred on April the 16th. The victim was a Mr. Clifford Drake, 58 years of age, and resided at 524 West 12th Street. Mr. Drake was also killed with the use of a firearm. Indicted on these charges will be Mr. Benjamin Davis Smiley Jr., which you see on the TV monitors. He's 22 years of age, and he was indicted for both murders of Ms. Carmen Riley and Mr. Clifford Drake. And he will be charged with the following crimes: 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of robbery with a firearm, tampering with evidence, aggravated assault with a firearm, and burglary of a dwelling with an assault or battery while armed with a firearm. For details with both of these murders, I would like to introduce Sergeant Jeff Birdwell, who oversees our violent crimes unit. Jeff?
Good morning, and thanks for coming. I want to touch base on a couple of things. One, no single individual ever solves a homicide. No detective, no lab, no technology. It takes an entire community to solve a single case. And I'm very sincere when I say that. From the very first phone call that comes into the 911 center, to the first officers responding, to detectives and crime scene arriving on the scene, to canvases, to citizens, to the laboratories for the state, and down to the state attorney's office, it takes all of us as a team to come together and solve one of these cases. With that being said, it also takes 2 other very important components. One is old-fashioned police work with boots on the ground, and 2, new technology. And that's what brought this case together. Now Sergeant Brian Wallace will step up in a moment, and he will tell you in more detail. But what has occurred with this case is evidence connecting to an individual that connected to 3 individuals. It started off with a firearm in this case connecting to both homicides. The same gun was used. And then Detective Wallace used new technology with telecommunication to connect 3 people to this crime. With that, shoes on the ground, locating people, doing very good interviews, working hand in hand with the state attorney's office, broke this case. It all started with that first phone call. It all started with an individual in the community who found some property in the back of his truck that he knew wasn't his, thought it was suspicious, and called the police department. And it was some items of clothing. Those items of clothing, along with some evidence inside the Drake home, linked Smiley to this homicide. And then, again, through electronic data communication, Detective Wallace linked 3 people who turned out to be related to both of these homicides. And it was just a great deal of effort on his part, and again, with technology that brought this case together. So, for all the details of the investigation, I will let Detective Wallace tell you. I do want to cover one thing real quick. I believe it was earlier reported that this is cold cases. By definitions, these were not cold cases because Detective Wallace had not left the investigative unit yet, even though they were unsolved cases. Detective Wallace never quit working. He was recently promoted last week and worked these all the way to his promotion, and the chief has allowed him to stay with these cases because he's so involved with them, even through his promotion to being a sergeant in patrol. So he is still actively involved in these cases, therefore he has solved 2 unsolved cases, not 2 cold cases. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Sergeant Wallace.
Good morning. My first involvement began on the 2nd homicide, which was the April 16th Clifford Drake homicide. And Sergeant Burwell's already mentioned that a firearm was used, and Mr. Drake had been killed based on the autopsy that he was killed by a firearm, and it was a homicide. It was not until we had sent those bullets to FDLE between this one and the Carmen Riley homicide, which happened to have been 2 blocks northwest and only three weeks prior to this one. Both of them were sent to the FDLE, and they came back with a hit saying that both of them were linked with the same firearm. As Sergeant Burwell had mentioned, there was clothing that was found on an adjacent street from the shooting, and that was sent to FDLE along with evidence inside the Drake residence, which both items came back with the same DNA for the same person. And those results came back in June 2013. However, there was no positive identification of the person itself. It was only that the DNA matched both items for the Drake homicide. It was not until February of this year that we got a positive hit for Mr. Smiley. Apparently he had been arrested for a felony in Hillsborough County. His DNA was taken, and FDLE took that information and matched all of both cases. To touch base on the technology part of what it is that happened, the Clifford Drake case was essentially a robbery, and not only was he a victim, but his stepson Mark Wilkerson was a victim of the robbery itself. He had some property taken to include his cell phone. His cell phone was used after the shooting, which led us to be able to find phone numbers of people that were being called by who was in possession of his phone. And that led us to the name of Samantha Lee. Samantha Lee lives in Tampa, but we had no additional information about her, had nothing to be able to confront her with in any information as to what her involvement would be with the homicide. It was not until the DNA hit that came back in February of this year that we were able to link Mr. Smiley with Ms. Lee, as they are blood relatives. The phone records also indicated that they were communicating with another family member, which we ended up being able to interview at the state attorney's office under subpoena. And we were told under the subpoena testimony that this basically both shootings were committed by Mr. Smiley, and he admitted to the witness that that is in fact what happened. We went to speak with Mr. Smiley in Florida prison in Bristol, I believe it was, Bristol, Florida, on the 28th of June, and he gave us no information, any admission that he had been involved in either of these. So yesterday, the grand jury convened on both of these cases. Ms. Lee was subpoenaed as a witness, as well as an additional witness, and the grand jury indictments were received for both cases for the homicide. And Ms. Lee was also escorted out of the grand jury room under arrest for perjury in an official proceeding. So that's the point we are to now.
You have to really go back. You know, I love the cops. I'm just telling you the way it is. We have to know that the bad guy goes in and unfortunately holds up Mr. Drake and Mr. Wilkerson on the street, in his house, exactly what happened.
It was in his house.
And then we can get into how it all unfolded, but we need the basics first.
Mr. Drake was actually asleep. Mr. Wilkerson was outside the house, had just come home on his bicycle, and there's actually an outstanding suspect, but Mr. Smiley's not the only one that we're looking for. But the 2 suspects actually accosted Mr. Wilkerson outside the house and escorted him inside the house, gave statements that indicated that this was going to be a robbery, and went directly to Mr. Drake's bedroom. Mr. Drake was woken by the gunman and started to panic, and that's when the shooting took place.
So we had the gun out from when he was outside and
yes.
Put it to the guy's head, or what happened?
It was just used as threats. It was one time put to Mr. Wilkerson's head, but it was specifically used to tap Mr. Drake on the forehead to wake him up. I was not the case agent for Carmen Riley, but the basic gist of that was that she ran what is commonly known in the community as a bootlegging house, where she would sell drinks, chips, snacks, anything like that. And that was well known in the community where she lived. And that was from the information that we got during the interviews, that it was specifically targeted because of that. There was at least a substantial income because of the business that she did there at the house.
Similar circumstance, or what happened there? You know?
Well, it's not similar because the only thing that's similar about it is that it was robbery related. It was assumed that Mr. Drake had a large sum of cash, but Ms. Riley was more well known because of the business that she had at her house. So that.
But I mean, did he walk in there? Was she sleeping? I mean, what was the circumstances?
All the information that we have at this time was that she was awake, running the business as normal whenever she was approached by Mr. Smiley.
So a little bit about the timeline here. Obviously, 2 years and a few months. What took so long? What were you waiting for? When did the pieces kind of come together?
When we initially had the first hit with the ballistics back in 2013, we can't do much with that unless we have a gun that happens to be in possession of somebody. The DNA, even though the DNA matched both articles of evidence in the Clifford Drake case, we didn't have a suspect. The only information that we did have was the phone calls from Mr. Wilkerson's phone, but the people that he was calling, people that phone was calling, we couldn't confirm whether or not that there was any involvement with what it was that happened.
Were they wearing masks, any kind of disguises?
No.
And then what was the key? What was kind of the breaking point here that finally led you to this guy?
The DNA in February. When a arrestee gets taken into custody for felonies, they will take their DNA, and my understanding is that that is exactly what happened. He was arrested on an unrelated gun charge in Hillsborough County, and that DNA was sent to FDLE, which ended up being cross-referenced with ours.
And the new technology that you referenced, what are you referring to there that helps?
This is cell phone records.
What evidence did you have? Was it articles of clothing from Mr. Drake? Or?
I don't want to get too much into that because we still have one suspect that's outstanding, but it was something that was brought to the scene from the suspects, and then the clothing, just some clothing on the adjacent street that we assume was ditched as they had fled the scene.
Have you already identified the second suspect?
No.
What were the items the Smiley took?
We have there was no information of whether or not anything was taken inside the Drake house. We have no confirmation of what it was that was taken from the Smiley residence, or from the Carmen Riley residence. We're only going on what the additional witness had told us, but that's not been confirmed from the evidence inside the house.
So in the end, you got away with nothing but his lives?
That essentially could be the best assumption.
Is there any indication there's some kind of struggle of why he may have shot these people? I mean, or did he just a cold-blooded killer?
Based on the witness testimony, Mr. Drake was basically frantic after having been woken up from a dead sleep with a gun to his face, and he was trying to get away at the time that the shooting started. Ms. Riley, it did appear that there was a struggle inside the house.
So this guy's address is listed in Tampa, but he was privy to information about a woman running a bootleg store here in Lakeland. Are we aware of any his connection to Lakeland? How was he privy to that information?
Yes, there's an additional witness that had given the information about the bootleg here in town to Mr. Smiley, actually to Ms. Lee. Ms. Lee is going to be, from the information we have, she's going to be the key to all of this. The information was given to her, and she basically contracted out Mr. Smiley to take care of the robberies.
In addition to that, Samantha Lee actually was living in Lakeland here some of this time frame, and she was living within blocks of both of these houses before she moved back to Tampa. So she, in addition, she was aware of at least Mrs. Riley, but there was, as Sergeant Wallace is saying, there is a third party that is working with us That is what we
That's what we
believe.
believe.
And was she, do you think, going to get a cut of the action?
Yeah,
You mind stepping in front of my, you mind stepping in?
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
We traveled to Tampa, interviewed her, although she was not truthful with us about the crimes. It does appear that she resided in Lakeland a short period of time in that same neighborhood. She's related to an individual that is cooperating with us and confirming that she was actively participating in the crimes. So she certainly is a part of this, thus the reason, as Sergeant Wallace brought out, she has been charged in a related charge of perjury with these murders. Whether or not the state attorney's office in coming months will charge her in some accessory form, there's still a lot of work to be done on these cases. We put a case together, the grand jury has handed down indictments, but it certainly hasn't stopped there. There's still a lot of work to do in the upcoming months, no doubt more information will be forthcoming. I hope, I have no evidence to support this, but I hope even that we can clear other cases, whether it's within our jurisdiction or Plant City or the Sheriff's Department or Tampa, because the information that we did get from Samantha Lee was that Smiley was coming to Lakeland, and the term she used was doing licks, which we commonly know doing licks is a street term for doing robberies. So we certainly don't believe he was limited to just these two homicides.
So there are potentially more arrests coming, but this is the trigger man.
That is our understanding today. That's our belief, that all the evidence supports that Benjamin Smiley is the gunman in these cases. And yes, we hope additional cases will be solved. There's still a lot of work to do. I just don't have evidence to present to the state attorney's office or to y'all that we'll be able to clear additional cases. That's going to be our endeavor.
Why was this a direct file case?
I'm sorry?
Why the grand jury?
The grand jury conveys on all first-degree murder cases.
And Smiley was already incarcerated as you guys collected all this evidence. He was in jail since you didn't pick him up off the streets after you collected.
That's correct. Detective Wallace and Detective Tim McDonald traveled to the location where he's incarcerated in Florida and did present the additional arrest for murder on the first case. And then we were waiting for the indictments to come down for the second murder.
How does it feel to get this kind of off your chest and off the books, I guess? And I know you say it's not a cold case. I'm sure a lot of people in the community kind of think of it as a cold case.
Sure.
It's been a while. So what's it like to finally get this taken care of?
There's a great deal of satisfaction that the entire investigative team feels, and no doubt the police department, the family, the community, when these things are brought to a conclusion. If you walk in my office right now, there's a board up that has multicolors on it. Unfortunately, the color red is used for unsolved cases, and maybe it's insignificant for those outside our little investigative world, but there's a great deal of satisfaction when that color gets changed. We can focus not only on future cases, but maybe even tying these people to some of those other cases that are on the board. But we live with these cases day in and day out, week, month, year in and year out. We wear these cases. We live with them. We know the families. We talk to people on a continual basis. They want closure. They want answers. They want justice. We want all those things for them too. But it's not as easy as it is on TV and in a 60-minute program where a crime happens, we get lab results back, and everybody confesses. It just doesn't work that way in real life, as you know. I'm sorry.
Just say any message to the community about you don't give up on these
Oh,
cases?
absolutely. And I came into unit in 2007, and if there's one thing that we continue to preach to the community is that the Lakeland Police Department, and all law enforcement, but I can speak for us, we never give up. Number one, the chief and the staff has dedicated 2 individuals who only work unsolved cold cases. That's all they do. Now, I will bring them out on a current active case just for their expertise and their help. But as soon as that is stable, they go right back to working unsolved cases. Detective Wallace, Detective Russ Hurley, and Detective Stacy Pugh is now going to take Detective Wallace's case or position. They will live with these cases from from the very first time I called them at 3 o'clock in the morning until that jury comes back with a verdict. And we attend, you know, it never goes away. Even once a case is solved, we stay in touch with the families. We get cards from family members. It's a connection that is hard to explain, but a tragedy connects people, strangers together for years and years and years. But to answer your question, there's a great deal of pride and a great deal of joy when one of these things are closed.
I have two questions. One is just housekeeping. Mr. Wallace, I heard sergeant, I heard detective. You're which?
I was a detective when these got cleared. I just got promoted last Friday to sergeant.
And spell your first name, please.
B-R-I-A-N.
Second thing is that everyone's going to want to talk to family members. So either when we're done here, we're all going to come over to you, or we can make it easier.
What I'd like to do, Ken, is if you guys are done with us, we're going to slide out and have Detective Wallace and Sergeant Wallace and Sergeant Burwell with the family up there. Is that okay with you guys? So they have a mic?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Just so that it's easiest for
Y'all noted that he's devoted 2 people.
And he is next, right?
Talk to. Sergeant Wallace, Sergeant Burwell.
What's this day been like?
Oh, it's a good day for me today. It's a blessing. And I thank him. He have been working ever since this happened, and I love you, and I'm just so excited. I'm so happy that he can rest in peace, and I can too. And it's just so good to know that he done a good job. Yes.
What's your shirt say?
Clifford Ray. His nickname was Peanut.
Peanut.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little about him?
Oh, that was a man that God sent to me. That was a man that God took on. It was his time. But he was a good husband. We was together 20 years, been married 13. I have 8 boys and 1 girl. He had no child from me. He raised, this was the baby boy. He raised them all. He was a hard-working man. He was a concrete finisher. He was a yard man. Everybody loved him. He was just real special. That was my second marriage. Yeah, he was a good man.
When this tragedy happened, talk about what that loss meant to you, losing him.
Lots. He was funny. He was loved by everybody. And that took away a lot of things. He had grandbabies. That was his heart. They're not here today. I thought they was going to be here, but they had to go to surgery today. And
When you heard the news, you don't think it's going to happen to you. What was that like?
oh, I had lost it for a little bit. Because I was at work when it happened. I couldn't do it no more for a little while. I was I'm just glad it's over. Thank you, Wallace.
I do like to appreciate the Lakeland Police Department for solving a murder that was close to me and close to the family. Everyone loved. We appreciate Mr. Wallace for all his work done for 2 years. So I think it's
Can we just get your guys' names really quick before you
my name is Mario Wilkerson.
spell that for us?
MARIOWILKERSON.
So you were outside.
No, sir. I was the one asleep inside.
What did you hear? What was?
I'm able to answer any further questions due to my mom.
Hey, I'm Marie Burks, his daughter, and I just want to say thank you, Officer Wallace. You stayed in touch with us, you let us know what was going on. You promised us that you would never give up, and I appreciate it. Actually, I'm here on behalf of both families because Carmen Riley was special to me also. My son dated Carmen's daughter for a while, and for somebody to take her life as well as my dad's life, it's They were both good people and they would do anything for anybody. And I'm just glad that everybody got closure. You know, Carmen's family can rest easy knowing that they finally got him off the street. We can rest easy knowing that, you know, they finally got him off the street for our family and everything. And I just want to thank everybody in the police department for helping solve this case. You're really appreciated.
We have a little sense of, you know, your loss, your dad. Tell us specifically about Carmen.
Carmen was a great person. Every time you see her, she just had a big, beautiful smile. She never bothered anybody. She'd give you the shirt off her back. Anybody that know her knew what type of person she was. She never even, I mean, you would barely see her upset about anything. And the love that it's not just only her family, the community had for her. You know, she was a good person, even it was just a great loss.
You guys are thankful for the police for keeping this going. How do you feel towards Mr. Smiley?
I don't have no words for him. He totally ruined two families' lives, and he's gonna get what's coming to him. And we will be there every step of the way. We'll be there to support our family as well as Carmen's family. And I hope we get what he deserves.
What does he deserve?
To me, for taking two beautiful people like that, I think he deserves that.
Did you say Maria Brooks? Okay. And do you have a picture of Carmen, by the way?
I don't have one on me. I don't have one on me.
Yeah, can we get your first name, the first speaker? We didn't get it. Mario told us we didn't know.
I'm Cliff's Drake wife, Sheila Drake,
And so she, S-H-E.
SHELIA.
L-I-A.
Sheila, can I ask one more question? Just, you know, it's been so long, two years and a few months. Did you have a moment where you thought this may never get solved?
I prayed, and he always kept in touch with us. And I'm just so excited not to go on with my life. I talked to him, I was his great side. He can rest now. And I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That concludes the press conference. If you have any other questions,